Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Training camp is fast approaching with the 2025 regular season not far behind that. And along the way, we'll be trying to take a look at some of the Giants' NFC East competition. If the teams around the NFC East even consider the Giants to be competition these days. And we're going to start with the Washington Commanders. And here to help me do that is longtime friend, DC area sports columnist, host of Rick Snider's Washington on YouTube, which is a fantastic listen, fantastic watch, even if you don't like the Commanders. So, and Rick Snider is here with us. Rick, thanks for the time.
Yeah, I know you Giants fans are thinking, what, a Commanders guy? But you want me on that sideline. You need me on that sideline. So,
yeah, well, it's always fun to talk to you, Rick. You know, we've been friends for, 45 years now, ever since University of Maryland college days.
Yeah, I know. I feel eternal anymore. But
yeah, I know. Off air, we were both talking about, we both turned 65 here this summer. So we're old guys. We've been doing this for a long time, but hopefully we still have people out there who care.
Turning 65 is my last birthday I'm going to worry about because I get double tax breaks and I'm on Medicare. But other than that, after this, there's nothing left to celebrate. Just getting old.
Oh, there you go. All right, Rick. Let's talk Commanders. Let's talk Giants. Let's talk NFC East. What are the expectations for Washington this year? I think I know what they are, coming off last year, with Jaden Daniels entering his second season. But what are the expectations? What's the sort of feeling around Washington about the Commanders?
I think everybody's expecting to make the playoffs probably as a wild card because Philly's probably the NFC East leader. That said, how many years has it been that it's been changing? There's not been a repeat division winner in years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
And, if it's not Washington, would you say it's Dallas? I don't think so. But, it's people expect them to win at least, 10 games and make the playoffs. And then with Jaden, as they showed last year, you got a quarterback like Jaden, you can just punch people out in the playoffs. And he did last year until the Eagles took him out. Mm-hmm. So if they don't make the playoffs, everybody's going to be pretty upset. That said, it's a difficult schedule. I'm sure the Giants are playing the same one. But Washington became a new prime time team on TV. And that comes with problems. Like I counted 5 road games that they'll get home about 5 a.m. Yeah, that takes a piece of you out because you can't sleep on the plane, or else you wake up with a lot of problems. Yeah. That's NFL crazy people. And then they go to Madrid too. So the schedule is going to take a piece of you out there, and you got to stay healthy. They did more or less last year. Jaden's the whole cornerstone of his team now. And if they don't make the playoffs with him, then you are disappointed, which is funny because last year at this time, they were coming off a 4-win year and just sucked. And suddenly you're in the NFC Championship, and now everything has changed.
Right. With the quarterback, with new ownership, with a new head coach, all of that, it's a much different feeling about the Commanders than it was not that long ago.
Yeah, my old friends talk to me again now.
Wow. I don't know about that, Rick. That's rough if they wouldn't talk to you just because the Commanders were bad.
Oh, you have no idea, man. I mean, I used to live on a big street corner. Cars would go by. My friends would see me. They'd honk the horn and yell something about, Redskins suck, thing kind of. Oh, yeah, I'm just raking leaves in my yard. People they take it seriously here. It's the only pro team that they really, really are into. The other pro teams, when they win, people pay attention. But they pay attention to Commanders. Like we came out with a new uniform throwback. And people just went wild. And I said, ooh, the stripe is back. Yay! Oh, God.
Wow.
People are nuts.
Yeah, it's like, Washington does have, they do have an NBA team and they do have a major league, baseball team, sort of,
And a
but
hockey team.
and a hockey team. Yeah. So, but yeah, let's talk about Daniels a little bit. There's a sort of a natural assumption that what we saw last year from Daniels is going to get better, and he's fantastic, but we saw the same from CJ Stroud 2 years ago, and then we saw him kind of take a step back, in 2024. Just your thoughts on Daniels in his second year, and if there's any worry about a step back, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Ironically, I was recently hired to write a book on JD, so it's coming out end of the preseason.
Nice.
On it. So I really had a deep dive on him, and write it in a month, which is nuts. And I think there's a couple of things. Watching him in the off-season camps, I thought he was even better. I thought his ball placement was a little better. The practices were going a little faster. I saw some improvement. The wild thing I always noticed about Daniels, the ball is never on the ground. I mean, even in practice, it's never on the ground. He's got his competitive spirit up a little bit. He's a little bit bigger in the weight room, but not enough to care about. But his confidence is even better. The defense loves to taunt him in practice because they get tired. Because most practices are favoring the offense. They get tired of that. So they love to taunt him, and he can taunt them right back. So he's really become a team leader among them too, which was great. Last year, they didn't ask him really to do that. He was allowed to grow into the role. So that was great. They've got a better offensive line this year, so that's going to help him. I think he's going to roll out to the left a lot more than he did last year. He's got Kingsbury, who's the mad scientist, who said basically, you haven't seen our playbook. Yeah, you saw 1 year, but I got lots left. So Kingsbury might have had a chance, didn't even interview for a couple of head coaching jobs. He wants to stay, and ramp up him. So there's a lot of positives that I see with Jaden and no negatives. So can he be better? I mean, if we go back to 2012, Robert Griffin had a great first year, won Offensive Rookie of the Year too. But he got hurt in the playoffs. That's the difference. He was rehabbing a lot, but he was never the same after that. Chase Young was the Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2020 and didn't realize he had to still work hard and, came back. He's never been the same player. He's been on two more teams. So you never know. But I would bet money that Jaden's going to be, even better this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Kingsbury and you mentioned the offense. And I think the one thing that happens, and you and I have both seen it, with the young quarterback, is the more experience they get, the more the playbook opens up. Because even though Daniels was terrific last year, I thought even watching them play against the Giants, there were times when Kingsbury was conservative with what he was asking Daniels to do. And I think that's the scary part, is that the playbook will open up the more the kid plays.
I think Kingsbury's worst game last year was the Giants game. It was 15-12, if I remember. It was all field goals. And I thought that was his worst game. So I think they will do a lot more. I think they drafted a first-round offensive tackle. That's going to help the right side, I would hope, on there. They'll have their running backs healthy again. Last year they got decimated there. They added Deebo Samuel. And I'll tell you what, Deebo Samuel might be their best receiver over Terry McLaurin. So there's a lot more for him to work with, just on that alone. Last year it was, Jaden, can you help us out? He won 5 straight games at the end of the last play. I mean, that's where you look at the record and think, man, you had a horseshoe in your pocket last year, winning 5 games on the last play. You can't do that again.
Yeah.
That's why people would kind of temper their expectations. They didn't dominate, but Jaden was always like, I got it. Here we go.
I look at, you talk about that, and I look at, people ask me all the time, you look at the Giants and they went 3-14 and they've got a really tough schedule, on paper. And I always say those schedules, you never know exactly how tough the schedule is going to be until you get to the games themselves. But, on paper, they're playing an awful lot of really good football teams. But I look at it, and like the 2 Washington games last year are a perfect example, because people will say to me, oh, that's a week 1 loss. Oh, the Giants aren't going to beat the Commanders at all. Never beat the Commanders. But the 2 games last year they lost 2 games by a total of 8 points. So, so it's not likely, but it's possible. It's not like NFL games are usually blowouts.
Yeah, and Washington's defense this year, is it better? I don't know. What they decided to do is put really big monster men in the middle of their defensive line. I mean, I'm used to being around NFL players, and these guys are boulders because they got tired of getting beat by Saquon and all these guys running on them. They did. I mean, if Lattimore is healthy and back, their secondary is better. They don't have a pass edge rush. That's going to be their one thing. But they decided we're going to just go straight up against you. So I think they're going to be better in that way. But I don't know. This team, I don't know. Last year, I thought Dan Quinn gave a master class in coaching with his staff, and he did so many things right. And what he really knows how to do is talk to the 20-something generation of players, which, it's a different way of talking about things. It's sort of like,
right.
And I would think, my father would have killed me for that. And today nobody notices, and he knows how to tap into that. And players, they can smell people who are posers or whatever, or don't like them. And I was thinking about that the other day about how Quinn is so genuine with them that they really do play for him well. So I think they can rally around. They still have the same energy in the offseason, because I wondered in the first year, big, heavy roster turnover. It ended at 80% at the end of the season. 80% of the previous gone. I said, you can buy into this stuff for 1 year. You can do this rah-rah stuff at times for 1 year. Now, what are you going to do in year 2 when they come back? Well, I've still seen that same kind of energy, hard practices and such. They start every drill with this footwork drill as something out of Parris Island and the Marines, and yelling and crazy. It's craziness. And I thought, would that last past the first day last year? It lasted all season, and they're doing it again. So they buy into him, as a leader, and that's their great strength.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that, the Giants in Brian Daboll's first year obviously make the playoffs, win a playoff game. Daboll wins Coach of the Year, but it hasn't translated since 2022. I think the difference is, Washington had its quarterback in place last year and has its quarterback in place. And the Giants are still, they're crossing their fingers and hoping that Jackson Dart will be their guy. And, signs have been good so far, but nobody knows anything until we see him start games and see how well he develops. So,
well, and here's my big question with the Giants. Why do you want to start an old veteran quarterback over a first-round pick? Because the old guy is not going to really do anything for you. You're not going to the playoffs, I would expect. So why don't you just play the kid and get him ready, unless he's just not ready, and then why did you draft him? So I kind of really perplexed to how the Giants are playing their quarterbacks.
Yeah, everybody has a different theory about that. I mean, a lot of people like the idea of let the kid learn for a little while. The difference, I think part of the difference is he's not a top 5 pick in the draft. If maybe if they had picked him 3rd overall, then you sort of have to start him. But that's the way they seem to want to play this is let the kid grow into it. Let the kid sort of learn the offense and grow into it. I don't think there's any way this is a redshirt year for Jackson Dart. I think sooner or later Jackson Dart is the starting quarterback. Whether that's because Brian Daboll has to get him on the field to save his job, I don't know. But it's a weird thing with the Giants. If you go back to the end of 2024, John Mara brought Joe Shane, the GM, and Brian Daboll, the head coach. He brought them both back, but he didn't sound excited about bringing them both back. He said, I better be in a better mood, by the end of next year, or there won't be, a year 5 for these guys. Oh, and at the same time, our biggest priority is to find a quarterback of the future. So those two things don't necessarily coincide. because finding a quarterback of the future is not necessarily guaranteeing you wins, in that quarterback's rookie season. That's the CJ Stroud, Jaden Daniels stuff doesn't happen. So I think the way to answer that question, I think, is trying to serve two masters, trying to win enough games and prove to ownership at the same time that they've got a quarterback of the future.
Which just doesn't work. And that's what happened last year for Washington. They got really lucky. They got a new GM who picked a new coach who picked a franchise quarterback. If you're out of sync with that, if you got a coach that needs to keep his job, they don't care about developing the quarterback, because they're not going to be here to see it. So that's when you get your priorities screwed up. That's when a coach tries to win the last game of the season to go out on a win and blow your draft order, those kind of things. So if you got the kid, play the kid, because your other guy isn't going to – what's he going to do? He's going to be gone next year, that kind of thing. I mean, unless your rook's just not ready. But I've seen him do it every which way. Jaden was – they gave Jaden 5 minutes to be a backup and earn it. And then once he got to the field, they said, you're it. And it was clearly it. I mean, Mariota is their backup. Is a good backup. And he stepped in several times and won games for them. He, and he's a good mentor for Jaden. It's a good relationship. But no one ever pretended that Mariota had that job in any way.
Right. And there are people banging the drum for Jackson Dart to start week 1, and it just doesn't look like that's the way the Giants are going to go. I mean, maybe if they hadn't signed Wilson, maybe if Jameis Winston was the only other option, maybe they'd go that way. But it's a weird dynamic. And, talk about your experience looking, covering the league. The Giants are in that situation with Brian Daboll where they talked for years about, we did everything to screw up Daniel Jones because we fired coaches and we changed GMs and we changed offensive coordinators every year. Well, if they fire Brian Daboll at the end of the year, Jackson Dart's in the same situation where he's in that spin cycle.
And I mean, last year, Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, the GM, they cut 2 first-round picks recently and traded another one. They got rid of Jahan Dotson in the preseason. And then they cut Emmanuel Forbes in his second season, and they cut the linebacker, name escapes me. But because they weren't their guys, it was easy to get rid of them. They just said, hey, as part of that badass show, and that's the worst thing that can happen to you. Patrick Ramsey had that happen to him here, where Dwayne Haskins, the owner wanted to sign Dwayne Haskins first round. Nobody in the room wanted him, but they said, he said, I own the team. And, Dwayne was cut the next, year later. I mean, it's just, you can need everybody on the same page to win. And unfortunately, a lot of teams just don't have that.
Yeah. And I think that Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, who both came from Buffalo at the same time, I think they're still on the same page, but is ownership also still on that page? And that's kind of the question with the Giants and the way that John Mara spoke at the end of last year. I'm just not sure because, like I said, he wants that quarterback of the future, which they've got now, but he also wants to win more than 3 games.
Yeah.
And, they'd like to be competitive. They'd like to win 7, 8 games, whatever. They'd like to be on the fringe of the playoff race if it's at all possible. But I just don't know. I mean, Russell Wilson's better than Daniel Jones, but is he good enough to make that much of a difference? I just don't know.
Why can't Eli buy part of the team and then he could be a coach too or something?
Well, maybe you can lend Eli a couple of nickels with all of your money from all your books, Rick.
Yeah, I think they were saying something like 1% is like something like $100 million or something now. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, he said, Eli said the other day, I think he told CNBC Sport, he said 1% of 10 billion is an awful big number.
Yeah. Yeah. You're sitting there going, that would be $100 million. I mean, $100 million. Yeah. What players got that? That's not player money. They're not that crazy. I mean, maybe the current superstars, like, when Jaden Daniels gets his new deal in a couple years, I was thinking he could be $300-400 million. Yeah. Well, that's a lot. Now maybe he can buy a piece of a team later on, but
Mm-hmm.
Eli was too early, and I guess you guys are you still waiting for Archie Manning to come out of college? And
Maybe. I think there's a segment of the fan base that probably is.
yeah, I mean, be exciting at least. Sell some jerseys.
There you go. You never know. Somehow or another, Arch Manning and the Giants. It seems inevitable, but it's not going to happen if Jackson Dart is what they hope he is.
Yeah, but the NFL has ways of moving players to certain teams too. I've noticed. Like the NBA. The NBA's lottery draft picks. Yeah, that's on the up and up. But
are you saying that the NFL would Cooper flag, Arch Manning to the Giants?
Never be surprised at that.
Hey, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned the Washington defense. Can you just sort of detail the personnel changes that they made? Because I know they've restructured that group a bit.
Yeah, I mean they finally parted ways with their first round pick John Allen, who I think was here 7 or 8 years. I mean, it was wild, but he just kind of lost the passion, and he just wasn't worth the juice anymore on the line. They do have Deron Payne still, who is the next first round pick out of Alabama. And he's been here like 7 years. They paid him some good money, but he's outside of his contract year. He's never been more like a 4-sack guy. And he does the hard work on the run that you don't see, but and then they just got a bunch of guys. Nobody I think is great on the line. And, linebacker, they're still pretty much the same at linebacker, I think, overall. Now, in the secondary, Lattimore should be healthy. Last year, they got Lattimore at midseason trade from New Orleans. He was never healthy, played basically a couple games. So I watched him in practice here. He seems like he's got his groove back. If he's back, that's a good corner for them. And then they got a second-round pick at safety. And we'll see what happens there. I don't know. Quan Martin, I think, is really improving for them, too, at safety. Turned out he played last year with 2 displaced shoulders. I mean,
ouch.
Whoa.
Oh, man.
I mean, that's just nuts. So he's hopefully healthy. They no longer have a guy like Benjamin St. Juste that you can just pick on all day long. They've improved there. So the problem is that the pass rush I don't think is going to be there. That's probably next year's priority. I was surprised they didn't go after anybody there. They just, I don't know, they held back on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm gonna throw a name at you. You talked about the Commanders moving on from Jonathan Allen. And we've talked a little bit about it's really easy for GMs and head coaches to move on from guys who they aren't invested in, guys that they didn't trade for, they didn't sign, they didn't draft. But Kayvon Thibodeau for the Giants is a guy that we keep hearing, when everybody talks about potential trades and this and that, and none of it is reporting. It's just lists and rumors and proposals and all that. But everybody says because the Giants have Brian Burns and Abdul Carter, they should trade Kayvon Thibodeau. The fact is, I mean, we've all seen edge rushers and, these edge guys really come into their own after 4 and 5 years in the league. We've seen a lot of those guys do that. And the other thing is, Kayvon Thibodeau was the number 5 overall pick in the 2022 draft. He was Joe Shane's first draft pick. I don't think Joe Shane's going to be in any hurry to get to move on from Kayvon, because he's invested in the guy. Yeah,
you'll never get rid of your own first round picks because you're admitting you were wrong, and nobody wants. They just won't do that. There's 2 things NFL coaches will not do. They won't admit they're wrong, and they protect their win-loss record at all costs, and that includes winning a game at the end that hurts the team, and you're gone, but you keep that win on your win-loss record. Coaches are really self-centered on these things. And GMs too. So nobody lets go of a draft pick easily. And now let him go. Is he 4 years in now?
This will be his 4th year. Yeah.
Is he a 5th-year option yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
They committed to the 5th-year option.
All right. So he's going nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, it theoretically makes him easier to trade, but like I said, that was Joe Shane's first draft pick. And to me, considering what happened with Saquon and how some of the other personnel moves, I mean, they've seen guys like Leonard Williams go places and have a career year, and Xavier McKinney go to Green Bay and have a career year. The last thing Joe Shane wants to do, I think, is to trade Kayvon Thibodeau and then have Kayvon Thibodeau become a better player somewhere else than he was in New York.
Well, that Saquon thing had to sting a little.
You know, that as much as it stings and it hurts and all of that, Saquon was never going to do in New York what he did in Philly. And it's, to me, it proved something that I've said for years. Running back, especially a top tier running back, a Derrick Henry caliber running back, a Saquon Barkley caliber running back, they're not pieces that you build from the ground up with. They're pieces that you go finish with. You know, for me.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Shanahan made Joe average 1,000-yard back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in Denver and in Washington. You know, Alfred Morris got 1,400 yards. You know, and did 3 decent years here, and then couldn't break a grape elsewhere. I mean, that's true. Systems sometimes make running backs what they are. And if you got nobody to block for you, then you're screwed at the line. I mean, last year Washington couldn't crack an egg in the interior running game. So
no, what I always say about Saquon Barkley is there's nobody better than Saquon Barkley at the second level. Once you get through the line of scrimmage, you get to the linebackers, you get to the safeties, there's nobody better at making guys miss, at accelerating, at running through guys, at running around guys. The Eagles can consistently get him to the second level. With the Giants, he had to fight his way through the first level. And you're not special when you're fighting your way through the first level. You're just not.
Yeah, it's true.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, Rick, when does Washington start camp?
Veterans report July 22nd. Rookies come in a couple of days earlier.
Yep.
They've got 2 scrimmages against New England up there before the first preseason game and against Baltimore. Those are really the key days, I think, of Dan Quinn's analysis of the roster is those practices more than the games, because they don't do much in the preseason games last year. I actually thought they weren't ready for the season last year and they lost their opener. I think you got to play people a little bit, you know. So you know, they all like, oh no, we can't let Jaden out of his dorm room. You know.
Oh, I agree, and I think the Giants have paid a price for that the last 2 years, because even when these guys play, Rick, you covered the league when they were real two-a-days, and maybe some of that's too much. All right, but I'd love to see these guys wear pads a little bit more and hit a little bit more and play a little bit more in the limited preseason games, because even when they do that, the first couple of weeks is just rough.
Yeah, but I've seen it go any which way, and I don't know that one's better than the other, but like Marty Schottenheimer basically ran a Junction Boys camp, 2 a day, full pads every day. And they started 0-5. You know, I mean, they were, you know, he was doing bull in the ring. He was doing all kind of stuff. And man, they just couldn't do it. And then they went 8-3 after that. But I've seen, you know, Club Med start off well. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't think there really is an answer to that. But I know with Quinn, you know, he'll really like to look at those scrimmages. That's where he picks up a lot of analysis of them, because now they film them so closely. You know, practice now, they can see so much. On it. That's going to be big deals. Washington's only got 6 open practices in Ashburn where they practice year round, because they're away twice, and there just isn't the room. And the afternoons are now walkthroughs for the TVA. So there is nothing in the afternoon to see. I mean, it's just guys standing on the field walking through plays. So there isn't as many chances for fans to see. Unlike when I was, you know, in Frostburg or Carlisle, you'd be there for 6 weeks. You can come see both of them every day. You know,
I mean, I just hate that. I mean, there have been years. I think the Giants have 11 open practices this year. There have been years when they've had, when they've had 8 or 9. Now that they're at their own facility in New Jersey. But I mean, I suppose for those of us who have to cover it, it makes it a little bit easier. But do you hate it for fans as much as I do?
Yeah, this is a chance for fans to, get autographs, and people can't go to games, and games are getting so expensive. I mean, Washington's planning a new stadium in a few years. It's going to cost a fortune to go to games. So here you can go. You can have a moment with a player. The old days when we were in Carlisle or Frostburg, 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
But at lunchtime, fans could eat in the same cafeteria as players, and they could hang out the front and get autographs, and none of that anymore. That's all gone now. But it was, those days were a lot better to learn, players, form relationships and all that. And now the NFL is all about money, and how can you squeeze anything out of it? Oh, you want, it's like, you want the player to say hi to you, that's $10. I mean, it's crazy. So I do feel for fans. And Washington, of course, they give away the tickets. They were instantly gone on there. So not that you probably can't finagle your way in, but I just think, it should be there for the fans to see. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've heard fans say, well, that was really boring. Well, it's not a game. It's not a game.
Right. Right. And you may or may not hit a practice where it's a full practice, where there's, it is practice and it's not meant to be exciting.
And I hate coaches who have it on the far fields. They're just tone deaf to what the fans, they can't see anything. I love Washington started building new metal stands, temporaries, which are great. You can sit in the stands and watch. Of course, they're like the high school metal bleachers. So in 100-degree day, you sit on that baby. Woo!
Yep.
Yeah. So
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I like the days when the fans aren't there because I can sit in the shade in the nice executive areas and just watch practice.
Yeah, that's what the Giants have now at MetLife. I mean, when they were in Albany, the guys would come out of the locker room and there was what they used to call autograph alley because it was a rope line on both sides that players had to walk through.
Yeah.
To get out to practice. And, fans would line the rope line and there were no bleachers. People would bring their own chairs and they would sit wherever they wanted. They'd sit up on the hill or they'd sit, you could sit, 10 or 15 yards from the side of the practice field if you wanted to. And it was a really good experience for fans. And now, like you said, they sit, in metal bleachers in a parking lot.
Yeah. In Carlisle years ago, Gibbs would have a night practice once a summer. And we were down by a nearby school field, and we got all these peewee football kids playing all around us. It was crazy.
That's cool. Yeah, it's fun though.
But there's no money in that anymore. So
no. Even once in a while, the Giants have a like a blue-white kind of scrimmage thing over at the stadium. But again, that's a few thousand people show up, but there's no money in it. So so why should they do it?
I loved when we used to have rookie scrimmages the first weekend of camp. But now camp is so short, they can't do it anymore. And you're not allowed to hit for 3 days. So you can't.
Right.
But we used to do them. They would do them against Pittsburgh when we were in Frostburg. And we would get, 10,000 people easy. Mostly Steelers. But, or they go up to do the Eagles. Now they do the Ravens mostly, something like that. But they don't have the rookie scrimmage anymore. And that was really a telling game. And I really miss that.
Yeah, but we're both old, Rick, and we remember those things. And but things change. Yeah,
they change. I don't know. It's just NFL is just. I get tired of the greed. I mean, Dan Snider was awful with that. He just saw his customers. They were down from that. 70,000 sold out and a couple 100,000 waiting list theoretically. They were down his last season to, I hear, 8,000 season ticket holders, and maybe 5,000 would show up. And the rest was all visiting fans. I mean,
Wow.
that's how much he burned that franchise. Now
Yeah.
they're pretty much almost back to sold out for 60,000. The new
Nice.
stadium is going to be 65,000. The new stadium is going to go back to RFK. There's a
Nice.
lot of political fighting right now, but in the end, they'll be back there in 2030.
Mm-hmm.
And they opted for a smaller stadium of 65, I think it is, or 60, around that. Around 65, because you got to get to 70 for a Super Bowl, where you can always throw down temporary seats on there. And they're even talking about doing rocking stands, which was my idea that they're now proposing. Because the old RFK was baseball temporary bleachers behind the visiting stand. They would rock. It was wow. It wasn't concrete rocking. It was metal bleachers. They're going to do that again with hydraulics or something. It's going to be really cool. It's just going to cost a fortune to come watch a game.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And, anyway, Rick, that's just the way it is. It's money. And that's why the NFL goes, to every country they can get into now to play games. Who cares about player safety? Who cares about competitive balance and all of that? We can go make money somewhere. So we're going to do it.
I think they know players are disposable and they treat them like that. Everybody's trying to make the money while you can. If you can stay in the league 3 years, you can, you never have to pay a house payment if you want. I mean, there's money for everybody for those who survive. But if you can't, then the league will move on from you in a second. It's too bad, but everybody knows that.
Yep, absolutely. Anyway, Rick, I think that's a good place for us to wrap it up. Maybe we'll be doing this again before week 1. So have a good rest of your summer. I know for you and me, it lasts about another week and a half.
All right. Wear your sunscreen.
There you go. Sunscreen, bucket hat. We're good to go. All right. Thank you much. And Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.